and welcome to the ICT4D Conference podcast, where we're sharing insights on driving more impactful use of technology for good. My name is Sonja Rötzel at CRS, and I'm interviewing experts for you to talk about digital development trends, innovations, and good practice. Welcome back. I have an exciting new interview series for you. Following our global in-person conference in Ghana, where over 700 ICT4D practitioners came together to learn from each other, but also hear from over 200 speakers about their digital transformation journeys, new innovations or use cases, and essential lessons learned when designing or applying technology to enhance programming and impact. So now from the comfort of your home or phone, as I know many of you are on the go when listening to this podcast, well, now you can discover these key messages and learnings from the conference. So kicking us off with the key ICT4D trends is my colleague Nora Lindstrom. Nora has been working in the intersection of technology, global development, and humanitarian rights for over 15 years. And now, since 2001, she's our Senior Director at ICT4D at Catholic Relief Services. So here's my interview with Nora, sharing her personal takeaways from the conference. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I know it's been a few years since the previous ICT4D conference in Uganda, so my first question is more general. What has changed in the sector since then?
Well, this was the 12th time that CRS has produced the ICT4D conference. And everyone may not know this, but actually started as an internal event aimed to strengthen our capacity in ICT4D at CRS. But as peers and partners got wind of it, they too wanted to join. And so over time, the conference grew and we made it a public event produced through a consortium of organizations. And as you said, the conference in Accra marked the return of the in-person ICT4D conference since COVID, essentially. And what we experienced was this real buzz that you get when people reconnect for the first time for a few years and really getting those in-person moments that matter. Because I think one of the things that we've all learned over the past 4 or 5 years is that nothing quite beats meeting in person. Now, in terms of some of the sort of key topics and trends that clearly emerged from the conference discussions, both on and off the stage, undoubtedly, generative AI was very high on the agenda. Lots of discussions and interest in how we might leverage generative AI for humanitarian assistance and development, but also a lot of discussion around the concerns and risks associated with Gen AI. Digital public infrastructure and digital public goods was also a key topic. And I think this is very interesting because this isn't something that was on the agenda in the conferences previously. So it's really a new theme that has arisen that I think is very relevant to our sector and something we need to talk through, right? And then the final one, and perhaps the most important one, was digital localization and how we need to change how we work, how we approach our work, who we work with, what we do in order to advance local leadership and in order to build, sustainable foundations for locally led digital transformation. The conference has always had a strong focus on local leadership. And what I was particularly pleased about this time was that nearly 3/4 of the attendees at the conference in Accra are based in low and middle income countries. And this is the highest representation of LMIC attendees in conference history. And in fact, probably at any global event on digital development that I've ever attended. So it's really nice to see that as a practitioner-oriented conference, we really managed to reach a lot of the folks who are practitioners in the countries in which we do the majority of our work.
Thank you, Nora. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so nice to see local leadership and local capacity building, not just on the agenda, but actually in practice, in the room, in the audience. So I think it was a fantastic achievement. So speaking about agenda, thank you for already sharing sort of these 3 main themes that emerged. But I'd like to delve in a little bit more in detail on, what was discussed and some key takeaways.
So this is a reminder for anybody who hasn't attended the conference. Well, our agenda covered 3 main tracks. The first track was on digital to tackle wicked problems, so asking for digital transformation, how it can help to address the most pressing challenges in our time, like food security, climate change, youth employment, public health, or the digital divide. The second track was on data innovation for impact, focusing on particularly using AI, as you already said, Gen AI, and as well as geospatial data, as well as other data topics. And the third one, and as you mentioned very much, probably the most important one, on local leadership for a digital future. And already, as you said, the digital public infrastructure and digital public goods were main discussions, but also discussing approaches to build responsible, sustainable, and locally owned digital foundations. So looking at the overall discussion and conference, what would you say are your key takeaways, particularly looking at your role at Catholic Relief Services?
Thanks, Sonia. That's a great question. And let me pull a few things out. With digital public goods in particular, and I think there's some really good questions around their sustainability, right? And that was clearly a discussion point. And from an INGO perspective, I think a key question for me is, what is the role of INGOs in advancing and sustaining digital public goods and digital public infrastructure for that matter as well? And so I think that's something that I'm going to continue to reflect on moving forward. Another key point was around AI. And it really comes down to, a lot of people are familiar with the expression garbage in, garbage out. And some of the sessions at the conference were very good at highlighting that organizations really have to focus on data fundamentals or getting their data right so that they can leverage machine learning or AI. Because otherwise, what comes out of any AI model is just going to be garbage if the data going in isn't good enough. And I think many of our organizations still have a fair bit of work to do to get our data fundamentals straight. I think 2 other points that I think that are really important that I want to raise here is, one is about digital divides. So we know that access to connectivity is expanding, but we also know that it's not expanding equally. And this came across very strongly at the conference. We need to continue to focus on bridging digital divides. This includes by enabling connectivity in our program areas, but also in building digital skills and digital literacy of program participants. And the final point, insight that I want to raise is that we need to talk about power. Digital transformation changes power structures and dynamics in the contexts in which we operate. And I think there's an opportunity for us to harness this in service of localization and the participatory agenda. And I really appreciate that there was a workshop on this topic of power at the conference.
Thank you, Nora. It's a very interesting points, and I think most of them probably we will see a lot of discussion going on over the next years and possibly at our next conference in 2026. Now, I feel like I've heard your opinion as a conference organizer as well as you're the IT director from CRS. But my last question is, what was your personal highlight? What session did you enjoy the most? Or one of the sessions? Might be hard to pick one.
Well, I will pick one. We had a panel discussion on greening ICT4D. And I think, 2023 was the hottest year on record ever in the world. And I think that in the ICT4D space, when we talk about digital transformation, we need to think about the environmental and climate footprint that digital transformation has. And I don't think any one of us has missed the stories of like how much energy AI and particularly generative AI consumes. But more broadly, ICTs have an environmental impact. We're thinking about the mining needed to produce all the stuff that goes into new devices and the e-waste associated with old ones. So I think it's incredibly important that we start thinking about not just how digital transformation can help us mitigate and adapt to climate change, but also how we can and we need to address its impacts on the climate and the environment. And so I really appreciated the panelists in the Greening ICT4D panel sharing some of what they are doing to address the climate footprint of ICT4D.
Yes, I agree. That was an exciting session. And for anybody who has missed the session, there is a recording of the panel discussion on our YouTube channel, as well as recordings of other key discussions from the conference. So that is my call to action. Nora, do you have any other final comments or words you'd like to share?
I would like to thank all the conference partners and sponsors and attendees for making the conference such a huge success. It was so amazing to meet with everyone in person, and I think it was just marked a fantastic return for the conference, and I'm super grateful.
Thank you. From some of our sponsors and partners, we will hear over the next few weeks as we have more interviews coming up talking about highlights from the conference. So stay tuned. You'll hear from us again next week.
Thank you for listening to our ICT4D Conference podcast. I'm your host, Sonja Ritzel, and I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If so, please leave us a review, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you.